where to begin with thinking out how the ban goes. I suppose the Paladin has good matchups against the Hunter and the Shaman from Faeli. Would struggle a little bit against that even lock though, but if you were to expect your even lock to maybe get banned, it makes sense. But we see that Kribo actually bans out the Taunt Druid from Faeli, and so I do think what he has to do is try and bully this Death Rattle Hunter. And as we've said many times, it's often that the aggro player has to hope to target the Death Rattle Hunter in their opponent's lineup, but it hasn't quite been working out for the aggro lineups today.
Yeah, Death Rattle Hunter usually finds, when it's got 3 chances at it, just some way to stick something on the board and do a few trades, and suddenly it's got the 5/5 wall out there. But obviously it's not favoured individually, but it just finds a way to get it done because the rest of the lineup is so good.
Yeah. What I do think Kribo should have a decent chance with is this Odd Rogue up against that even lock especially. Might struggle a little bit more against Shudderwalk, but against Hunter the matchup is fine as well. And it seems like all of the decks from Kribo have maybe one good matchup, one bad one, and one that's around 50-50 the way I'm viewing it. So it's hard to give the favor to anyone in particular, but I do think that the way the Death Rattle Hunters have been playing out so far throughout the tournament, I think Faeli can get the win with it.
Yeah, I'm going to pick Faeli because I feel that Kribo was putting too much pressure on himself in the last round. He seemed to be... There's 2 ways of going when you advance deep in a tournament. You get less and less nervous because you sort of proved more and more of yourself already, or you start thinking about winning the tournament and that puts the pressure on. And so far I think Kribo has played great, but he did start to look like he's putting pressure on himself in that last round.
Yes. So the first of the series will be the Odd Rogue from Kribo up against the Shudderwalk Shaman from Faeli. And often I do think the Shudderwalk has a leg up on this one just because of the power of Volcano as a board clear to anything that the Rogue has to offer prior to turn 5. But that's Myra's Unstable Element refill sometimes is what gets the Rogue over the line and has made the Rogue a bit more powerful in the matchup with this new expansion. But the hand of Faeli with double draw, I don't think you necessarily want to be seeing that against a faster deck.
Yeah, a lot of weird stuff happens for the Shudderwalk. It does clear up multiple boards, but sometimes it needs to find that Healing Rain plus 1 last taunt or something just to lock the game out. It draws a lot of cards, it holds on a long time, that's important. The way it does sometimes lose is it just needs 1 more card. It seems to need a lot of that removal to actually get the job finished.
Yes, very true. And we perhaps might see a situation like that later on in the game. And Faeli now has this option to coin out the Acolyte of Pain, or I guess the Manatite as well, because he did see that Kribo unfortunately did not have a 1-drop, so that it's very difficult for him to actually clear off the Manatite this turn.
Yeah, the only very brief pause is, do I need Hex? And the answer is no, you don't, because Kribo has to deal with this Manatite immediately.
Yes.
And obviously going in with his face there means that next turn lets a Fledgling go face in some situations.
Faeli, even though it's quite off curve, has the option to immediately neutralize the Fledgling with Earth Shock. He could go for a greedier play of one of these 3 drops, but the thing is, if the Fledgling manages to get stealth, suddenly it's really scary, can't be targeted by Hex next turn or the Earth Shock.
So Faeli has 4 cards he's looking for, double Lightning Storm, double Volcano in his deck. 22 cards left. If he plays the Manatite Totem, he'll draw 3 more cards before his next turn, which gives him a great chance of drawing one of those 4 AoEs. So
even
he
past
chooses
stealth,
not to Earthshock, even though it's terrifying, and get on with it, and he has got away with that there.
It's definitely respectable, and also it has this added condition that if Kribo wants to go face with the Fledgling, he's probably not clearing the other Manatite Totem.
Yeah, that was the attack last turn, set up to not be in this position, so Faeli just put him back in the position he was trying to avoid. But Kribo also identifies that the opposite is true. If he can just get a massive Wind Fury Fledgling, that is a way to win against all these cards that Faeli is drawing.
Unfortunately, Wind Fury is not an option here, and now he has to decide which of these 3 to take. The Can't Be Targeted looks like it's just decent against those single target removals, of course, but as you mentioned, AoE is likely to be in the hand for Faeli at some point soon. So if far in the future you're thinking about Volcano, then the health seems like a decent pick, but I do like that because you're going into turn 4 that he goes for the Can't Be Targeted.
Yeah, and now Faeli does have to, if he wants to Lightning Storm, he has to take a pretty scary 50-50. With that in mind, might be tempted. I mean, if he Lightning Storms, he should kill one of these 2 minions, like 75% chance to kill at least one, which means that his Manatite is protected again, but he won't want to be overloaded. I do wonder if we just see a Hex here.
Hex on the Blood Knight?
Yeah,
that
it seems awful,
really sad. Yeah. So he is just going to take the
that
gamble
75.
and Fingers crossed, both these players don't really want to look at the screen, and
oh
my
no!
goodness.
And that means the Fungal Mancer is going to go
Well,
pretty
he can
crazy.
still Earthshock the Blood Knight to at least remove 1 minion. It feels awful, but he has to do it.
Ouch.
The bright side, Faeli still has a lot of cards in hand. The second Lightning Storm has a good chance of maybe clearing up the Fledgling, depending on what kind of buff it gets.
Now it's just shut your eyes if you're Faeli every single turn.
And Kribo also is tempted to just remove the mana type, but I think that the Fledgling needs to survive if he wants any type of advantage in the game.
Yeah.
Having seen a Lightning Storm, it must be tempting to go for Giggling Inventor and wider onto the board. Fungal on this 1 minion is very aggressive, not going for the extreme value, but if he gets the Wind Fury, it could pay off big time.
Yeah, he may not have many turns in the game where he actually gets minions to stick from this point on. Yeah, it doesn't get anything of use there.
Well, Faeli is overloaded, so that is one thing that Kribo has going for him. No possibility of Volcano yet, so Kribo is just going to go for the best stat buff.
Now, this turn for Faeli is exceedingly tough.
Yeah.
How can he even try and get this
he really
going?
needs Volcano for the upcoming turns, because Lightning Storm just won't do it anymore, even if it high rolls on the next turn, and he can't use Hex or Earthshock on that can't be targeted Fledgling.
Yeah, Kribo definitely taking the right option there of the ones that he was offered, and he has been unfortunate that this hasn't done even more damage.
So if Faeli's just on that Find Volcano plan, it might just be a Farsight here, as passive as it seems.
Yeah.
Maybe an Acolyte. Next turn, it's bound to get a draw anyway.
And the only problem with that is you then are all in on that plan. And that's why he's taking a while to commit to it, because it's obviously with no minions at all to challenge the Fledgling, that would be the only option.
I mean, between now and next turn, assuming he plays Farsight or Acolyte, he does have 3 chances to get it.
Yep.
I think there's a way that Kribo can actually overdraw Faeli if he goes for the Acolyte. Not that it's a big concern in Faeli's mind. Right now, getting the whole combo done is the last of his concerns.
Yeah, if you can just withstand the pressure as Shudder, what your opponent usually just concedes at some point before you actually have
Third
to.
try for Wind
combo.
Fury, he finally gets it. Third
Ouch.
time's the charm. And that means Kribo can put Faeli to 8 just with this. And he's 1 mana off lethal from being able to Leroy and Dagger.
Absolutely ridiculous. Healing Rain, of course, in the hand for Faeli, if it comes to worst, might buy him 1 more turn. Maybe have to roll another Lightning Storm.
In this position, you might want to go for Death Rattle for a bit more resiliency against AoE, as you know that the Fledgling cannot be targeted by single spells.
2 plants. He feels that he's got Faeli low enough that he doesn't mind just setting up, keeping some sort of board. Obviously, gives you a chance of getting Second Fungal Mancer, or it just gets too damaging.
So given that Faeli will have full mana, Kribo is very much deciding on whether he wants to actually go for Leroy immediately to play around taunts coming out, I suppose, on the next turn. Instead deciding for, I guess, what will be an SI7 ancient play.
Wow. Odro piling in his damage.
Yeah, he didn't combo it out. I'm a bit surprised about this.
So
I guess mind control tech is a thing, but I feel like the 2 damage could be quite relevant given Healing Rain and things like that.
Yep.
Because now Faeli has the opportunity to maybe high roll with the Lightning Storm and then clear off the Fledgling with the Acolyte of Pain.
Yeah, I feel like Kribo is just holding back because I think he thinks he's won anyway if there's no Volcano and just wants to reload in the instances where it's not there. And this is the thing where he didn't buff the Fledgling to +1+1, so if he rolls 3 on it, he will get rid of it.
Ooh.
Another 2 roll for Faeli though.
Yikes. I do think that could signal the end very soon. He can heal up to 18 again, but of course this Fledgling is dealing 12 on its own. Leroy is a lot of damage.
It's a lot is definitely the right total.
Yeah, it's 18 with the minions, 20 with the dagger. And Kribo is going to take this matchup, which I did not put very favored for the Odd Rogue.
Yeah, especially when Faeli started drawing all those cards. Kribo didn't get anything down early in the game. And the Fledgling really just went all of the way.
Good question. Why doesn't it give it Mega Wind Fury when you take the Wind Fury twice?
I think it's good enough already. Perhaps it
That's
did
fair.
in playtesting and then somebody nerfed it before we even saw it. No, I'm not losing to this Mega Wind Fury again. Scrub that off the card immediately.
I have to say, Kribo has had a very stressful day so far, having
Yes.
to go through a regame between his match of himself versus Lambie series. He did manage to end up taking...
I sort of followed him because of that, just coincidentally, and he has just risen really quickly.
So it will be the second try on the Shutterwalk Shaman for Faeli, and Kribo with the full mulligan on his Secret Hunter, which we casters do not seem to like, but he has been piloting it straight to victory throughout the day. And Kribo's lineup has been very similar to what Ender brought. Unfortunately, Ender was eliminated yesterday, save for the inclusion of Token Druid, I believe. Or sorry, a Druid,
yeah.
Not Token, it's Malagos over the Tempo Mage.
And Ender didn't really get to play Hearthstone in that match, really. Muzzy just crushed him without anything actually happening.
Yeah, that was kind of the bad end of the draw for Ender, unfortunately, but maybe the luck of the Secret Hunter is with Kribo for this one. And he does have a decent opening.
He
Would
does.
have loved to have that Dire Maul to curve into Grappling Razor Maw with.
Faeli also has got a pretty tidy hand though. He's got the Keleseth and the Lightning Storm. The Lightning Storm owes him one surely after that, and the Ooze. So he's got decent minions to play on curve to make sure you hold in there at the start.
Yeah.
And he won't mind dragging this out for a long one. Sure, you're up against Rek'Sai if it goes too long, but the Shutterwalk has that inevitability about it.
And there's just something so annoying about all these decks that play Keleseth as just a card that is like, okay, I'm not playing any 2-drops, so let me put it in anyway. They're not actively giving anything up, like Death Rattle Hunter and Shutterwalk. And the fact that it's so punishing to these aggro decks as the only early minion to be played is insane. It prevents Kribo from being able to play out the Crackling Razor Maw and possibly curve out into a Coin Houndmaster, into another Houndmaster, the good old Coin 4 into 4.
Yeah, the only card that Shutterwalk's ever played in that slot really other than Keleseth was the Pyromancer for a while. And obviously that's pretty good against aggro, but when it gets thrown out again for the Keleseth, you know that Keleseth is ridiculously good.
Kribo here thinking about if he wants to coin out the Shaw or perhaps just go for Animal Companion. Of course, Huffer would be a really great outcome, allowing him to value trade the Manatite Totem. And he gets the next best result in Misha, so Faeli will get another draw off of this, but at least it's able to challenge the board from Faeli.
Did Faeli shuffle his deck? He seems to have the same cards as last time. So he has got the chance of playing this second Manatide. A little bit more risky when you're doing this against a deck that can hold on for a bit longer, because you are going to have to start playing those cards or you will start overdrawing things.
Kribo is a very emotive player. You saw him visibly wincing at the sight of the second Manatite Totem. And who could blame him? This is just such an incredible start from the Shutterwalk Shaman, and from here on out, every board that he develops will be vulnerable to Volcano.
Sure. Pretty well protected here, so always a good time to throw it down. I think with Shaw the rule of thumb is if you can get it down safely, play it, and if you can't, play it anyway.
Yeah, and I like the recognition from Kribo that he is so far behind on board, and having to trade into one of the Manatite Totems really doesn't staunch the card draw from Faeli that much because he's already drawn so much. So Kribo is just deciding to start going face, and maybe if he can roll a Huffer off this Animal Companion, get some kill commands off the trackings, he can find a win that way, although it's looking quite unlikely.
A lot of planning for Faeli here. Obviously the Hex on the shore is a relevant thing to do, but working out what he puts into Misha, probably nothing, and with all the trickiness of the traps as well, making the turn extremely complex. Subject 9 is a nightmare to play against, I'll give it that much, with all those secrets. It takes so long.
Kribo here must live without fear of Volcano, without fear of lightning storms, and just start sending some damage to the face. With the added bonus of this poisonous, he might consider maybe trading off one of the totems, but I think that they have drawn so many cards, and at this point, maybe will even be a slight detriment to Faeli trying to get stuff out of his hand that Kribo shouldn't need to worry about them. Also, if Volcano were to come out, then Faeli would likely need to trade them away anyway. So I think it might be Houndmaster and Crackling Razor Maw onto some sort of combination of these minions, because then if you go all in on the Misha, the Hex is suddenly a big punish as well.
That looks pretty easy.
Yes.
Not like earlier when
Plan
there's
B,
choice between
Lorinda.
Spellstones and Rexars. I like this Rexar. It
Yes.
looks really good. Gives him then even more confidence to go with the plan you've been talking about, which is the semi all-in plan, just get as much damage in as you can. And he does have some sort of backup plan if it should go wrong.
It's all going straight to the dome, and we do see that Faeli doesn't have Volcano, but the double Lightning Storms could get quite a lot of work done. It does mean that he'll be overloaded for 4 next turn, but because he still has these 3 drops, Electrum, Mind Control Tech, and Ooze, it's not the worst turn following up.
He needs to start taking evasive action really rapidly with those plans, though. Those plans are becoming essential rather than just something he can do. He's facing so much damage now.
Yeah, the scary thing about going for double Lightning Storm, I assume, is if there was a Spellstone to follow up, in which case you wouldn't have any AoE to answer that. So Faeli's going to go for probably 1 Lightning Storm in this half measure, and most of the time, all of the time, you clear this off to trade your minions. And with this high roll, it's even better.
Yeah, this is what Keleseth has done, that gave him the option to use those 1/4s to trade in if needed. Obviously, 0-3s don't trade very often.
He's thinking about whether he should dump the Mana Tides because he has been drawing quite aggressively, or I do like just maybe dumping the Glacial Shard instead.
Yeah, you don't want an accident to happen where you end up overdrawing your Shudderwock or something. We've seen it more than once in Hearthstone history, let's face it.
It's very smart actually to just go for the half measure and dump 1, I think.
Yeah.
Even though the numbers don't quite add up, it's very much safer for your hand size. And now Kribo, I do believe he will be starting on the second game plan of going for Rexar. Do you think it's too early? He does have this Animal Companion which could turn into a Huffer, but I don't see kill commands that can support the Smart plan at this point.
Yeah, it doesn't look like he's going to get 18 damage through. With all those cards drawn, there's a very good chance there's Healing Rain in Faeli's hand as well. And let's get on with building some good old-fashioned beasts and hitting our opponent with those as well. And then you can use the other cards in your hand, the Houndmaster, the Razormaw, even the Animal Companion, as support cards to the beasts you make.
That's right. And Faeli has had such an impressive start with his minions off of Keleseth and a lot of card draw that we haven't really been keeping track of the original game plan of Shudderwock, which is of course to get that combo. So I do believe the Saronite is the first of the actual Infinite Chain that he has to play. No Life Drinkers yet. Grumble hasn't been seen. Although second Saronite is adding to that road to doom.
Yeah, just stopping Kribo from getting through at all, and actually this is where Kribo might end up having to start playing defensively just to stop the minion onslaught, and that's when Shudderwock does so well, because then it just takes its time, as much time as it wants, gets things in its hand and wins one way or the other. It doesn't really matter to it.
You know, if Keleseth weren't a thing, this Mossy Horror would have been so great.
This Keleseth has been absolutely fantastic this game. You see some Keleseths and you think, that's alright, but this one, it has done everything you could ever want from an amazingly broken 2-drop.
Okay, so Kribo decides to go for the Stealth Poisonous combination on the Bear Shark. More importantly, the keyword is Stealth, which allows him to maybe develop a board if he keeps getting a bunch of these stealth minions, like as we saw in that series against Blood Trail, I think. Yep. Of course, his opponent wasn't playing Shudderwock Shaman at the time, but it's a really powerful way to force your opponent to have to play Volcano in this case if they actually want to clear it, because you can happily just sit on those, develop other stealth minions if you should be so lucky, and find a surprise lethal that way. Of course, in that series against Blood Trail, Kribo had not too many taunts to have to deal with and also kill commands to support the plan, but Faeli looks so far ahead that I'm not sure if Kribo is going to have any beast that can save him at this point.
And this is the downside of stealth, even though it is definitely the way forward to try and connect to face. It is sort of slow considering the minions you're trying to build compared to the rush that you can quite often get. And that means that Faeli is allowed to react to it, so the healing range just, I can see what you're doing, you're going to stealth me to death. I'll just put a load of taunts and heal myself.
If he took the Kodo, combined with Dire Maul, it would be playable this turn, it would kill off the Mana Tide, and at least put something to start challenging the board. But man, Faeli's looking like a zoo player right now with these buffed up Keleseth. Saronites.
But yeah, Keleseth buffed them up. How long can this go on for this particular game of Hearthstone? It's looking like Faeli is well in command here.
Yeah. With 12 points of damage represented on board, he could go very aggressive against Kribo, but I do assume he'd like to clear off at least the Bear Shark. No Hex to be a convenient clear onto the Kodo, but I think he can just preserve this taunt wall and feel confident soon. Of course, no life drinkers in the pool either, so just playing the tempo shutter walk isn't gonna get too much done. But it has.
Is it not? There's two chain gangs, 2 shards.
Sure. Yeah. Actually, that sounds really good, Lorinda. I take it back. It won't get the lethal done, but it's gonna get the board to an insurmountable advantage.
Yeah, one of the hard things about playing Shudderwock for me is you have to check every turn exactly what does this Shudderwock do for me now, and this one clearly.
It's a bloat bat or a dream for Kribo now.
But if he does get that bloat bat, it
With
will
poisonous.
It will go crazy. It's not an impossible chance, like 1 in 90 or something. I used to know back when I was a lad.
You're the numbers guy, Lorinda. What happened?
There's a lot of numbers now. And my brain is already full of numbers. No space left. There's no space left for Kribo to continue this game either. And Faeli levels it up at 1 apiece.
Keliseth, what a card, right? And Faeli definitely knew how to take advantage with just going for that mana tide.
I think, as we all know, and sometimes just freezes up and doesn't do anything good at all. And this Subject 9, I know we've all been dissing, but obviously it's working well for players out there. It's just amusing that all 4 of us happen to dislike the same deck. That's really rare in Castle World because we're all pretty different.
Yeah, I will say the games that Kribo has won with this, he has had Spellstone. And he lost the last game and didn't have Spellstone. Strong correlation?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's kind of the point of the deck, is you play Spellstone, you win. And the rest of the deck is trying to find alternative things to do for those games where you don't play Spellstone.
Yeah, and if you strongly, or you hard mulligan for it, and of course there are 2 copies in the deck, I guess more often than not you do draw the Spellstone, so I can understand how the deck has a respectable mid-rate. But if you're talking about a good hand, that is one right there for Kribo. Wild Growth and Twig of the World Tree. Absolutely insane start. Just gonna toss out MC Tech, and wow, UI too.
Wow.
Right? Just a Nourish to complete the happy 4-card combo.
However,
happy for one player, I suppose.
He still has to get there. Faeli's hand isn't particularly bad himself. He's going to have his own attack.
Wow,
and that looked like a terror scale off the top.
Yes, it did. So we have a game on our hands for sure, and it will be on Kribo to try and stop the offensive from Faeli, which will be coming out come turn 3.
So obviously the reason this hand is so good from Kribo is this Twig is going to get activated so rapidly. We'll give the option of a 20 mana turn where he does a load of things, or just break it naturally, and sometimes you just get like 3 wild growths out of it.
Yeah. A lot of the time being able to turbo out the Twig can swing this matchup, or almost any matchup, I would argue, except Evenlock, because they can put big taunts in your way that don't allow you to swing the Twig, in the favor of the Malagos Druid, because they can do absolutely insane things that not only answer your opponent's board, but give them back the board, have this, you know, unreasonable amounts of armor, and then just win the game from there.
Unreasonable amounts?
Yes.
You're right. It's a pretty good description of that armor. I never thought of it that way. Yeah. Something we haven't seen much of in this tournament is the Savannah High Main for Faeli, for most players. And Faeli is playing it. A lot of people cut it out for more consistent Katharina. And the downside of that is sometimes you don't play on curve. The upside of playing the High Main is it does curve out beautifully on 6 if you happen to pick it up. Yeah,
the curve for Faeli is looking very strong. Terror Scale next turn. He can play either Shaw or play dead with another card if he draws something good the turn following. And then the other option that he didn't play on turn 5, and then this High Main. Looking at the hand from Kribo, aside from the Twig, not too much going on. The Spellstones, without being powered up, are going to have not much effect onto the Devil Swords that will be popping out of the eggs starting now.
Yeah, this one's not going to be a slow turn. Faeli, one of those players who seems to play at the pace you would expect for a turn. Like, easy turns he plays quickly, hard turns he plays slowly, and the rest he plays somewhere in between. So the Branching Paths provides a very interesting option for Kribo here. I do believe he will go for 1 draw and 1 armor. I think it looks good having that buff Spellstone and the Twig to at least clear off the first Devil Sword. And the other buffed Spellstone will help clear off the second one. Yeah, this might be a harder choice now because he hasn't drawn much. This makes a lot of sense for that removal.
Yeah, you would love to take draw there if you had the Liberty just to get you closer to that Nourish, but Kribo knows that this is way too much pressure to leave up this early on.
And he's going to get the bad news over the next couple of turns. There's a lot more pressure where that came from. And Mossy Horror now chilling in Faeli's deck as well over the last couple of turns. So all the ways of stopping this involve ramp, really, because playing on curve or playing one above curve with a wild growth is not going to get it done for Kribo.
Yeah. Faeli here, I think the natural play is just to drop the Houndmaster Shaw, although technically it just is less damage onto the board for next turn than would be the play dead.
Uh-huh.
But he's actually going to go for a flanking strike onto the egg, which surprises me because he has that play dead in hand.
And he actually picked it up, did it,
Yeah.
and is now just resetting his mind because he's not sure he's happy with that.
Yes, I suppose the punish for maybe setting up Shaw into a wider board later on and maxing out the value in the play dead is the one of mind control tech in the deck from Kribo. But I do think that Faeli is so far ahead that he can just go for this.
Yeah, this also means he can play dead, play decks, and also flanking strike in one turn, getting an extra 5/5 over time. And curve into that high main. This is absolutely crazy.
It is, and Kribo, the best he can do with that whiff of a draw is just clear off the Houndmaster Shaw, take 3 damage in the process, and yes, his armor total, his health total is quite high right now, but this could change really, really soon.
Yeah, it's going to come down rapidly as soon as this is established. And he still hasn't really got a hand. We thought his hand looked great at the start, but it just hasn't developed in the slightest for him.
He needs Nourish or maybe Malfurion to stall out, but just Malfurion, I think, is not going to cut it here. Just the one damage in the process, and yes, his armor total, his health total is quite high right now, but this could change really, really soon.
Yeah, it's going to come down rapidly as soon as this is established. And he still hasn't really got a hand. We thought his hand looked great at the start, but it just hasn't developed in the slightest for him.
He needs Nourish or maybe Malfurion to stall out, but just Malfurion, I think, is not going to cut it here. Just the one damage in the process, and yes, his armor total, his health total is quite high right now, but this could change really, really soon.
Yeah, it's going to come down rapidly as soon as this is established. And he still hasn't really got a hand. Last turn, so I think he just carries on.
Yeah, and I think MC Tech, even if it takes the high main, there's still too much damage, and it's at that mana point 8 that Spreading Plague cannot fit in the same turn. Not that Faeli would have been scared of it because he has this Mossy Horror. Kribo gonna start off with a Ferocious Howl. Wild Growth is not what he wanted to see.
So the only way he stays alive involves popping the twig now, I think, which is not where he wants to be either, really.
Yeah.
That takes away all the danger for the foreseeable future for Faeli. If he's not even just got guaranteed lethal, I don't think he has.
.14 health. Yeah, even if he's able to naturalize that 5/5, there's still 12 on board for Faeli, and of course that hero power will close things out.
He can UI the 5/5, gain 5 more armor. But still looking pretty precarious.
Time waits for no one.
So this Moonfire is undoubtedly going to land onto that 3-1, but Kribo, of course, just going for the draw first. Make sure that everything is clean in terms of order. And he will hang on just a little bit from what we could see. Faeli has this tracking.
Yep, he's doing a good job staying alive, Kribo, and he can turn around with his deck, but it's got a lot of turning around to do. Have like cubes and play deads. Are they good?
They are pretty
They were
good,
good
indeed, especially on that high main. I was trying to look for if there was any way for Faeli to find lethal off of this tracking. I don't think it's available. The most damage he can get off the top is just a candle shot.
That's another cube. to go with the cube and the play dead in his hand and the high main on the board.
And I do think Faeli just locks this up every time if he goes for that cube and play dead onto the high main after sending everything face, because Kribo's best play in that case would just be to go for Spreading Plague to stall out again. And Faeli has the Mossy Horror to check that.
Yeah, it looks really good for him. I mean, Spreading Plague into Branching Paths would prevent the Mossy Horror, and that would be what he's just making sure he's okay with if it happens. Your opponent has just played Ultimate Infestation, so you have very little information about their hand. But at the end of the day, yeah, with that lack of information, just a bit of maths on your side, just got to do what you do.
Everything works out perfectly in terms of board space too. There is only 6 minions, so there is room to play out Mossy should a Plague come out, but that is not even an option for Kribo.
I'm writing 2-1 in my book.
I mean, do you see any way of surviving? There's Howl and Branching Paths and Naturalize to clear one thing, but there's the minions on board just have so much resilience. I guess technically he can isolate the 3 Death Rattle minions and armor up, but I don't see how that's winning him the game.
Yeah, same with Plague there. Because you can't Plague and Branching Paths, even the delay just wouldn't work for you. But he's not got this far in this tournament without having a look through for some game-saving plays. I just don't think he's going to find one on this occasion.
No. I would agree very much. So it looks like it's going to be for double armor here.
But first, see if you can find something else.
Yeah, because the turn is going to be Branching plus Naturalize, so you might as well use the mana, because the 1 armor from the hero power is not going to do anything anyway.
There's a Malygos, but nothing with it damage-wise right now.
Yeah, the egg curve was just too insane from Faeli in the beginning, and going into the high main, there just wasn't much Kribo could do.
So quite a lot of this board is removed. Still looking like only about 2 turns required for lethal. Naturalizing a high main in an attempt to draw his Plague.
It removes as much damage as naturalizing the other hyena would. Technically, only 2. So you'd rather get rid of the Death Rattle minion, but yeah, this is just so much damage for Faeli, and Kribo is out of armor gain.
Yeah, and he's not out of win conditions. He's have quite a few of them left, but he's not got very much direct damage left in his deck.
I think Faeli here is just trying to think of how can I ever lose from this spot and make sure that that doesn't happen. It might be some kind of crazy Alexstrasza on his own face and then go for a tempo lethal that way. So that's the reason for trading off some of these minions.
Yeah, how do I beat next turn Alexstrasza? Make sure you've got 2 turn lethal at all times. Make sure you've got a plan against the Plague. Just like that play there, he had to make sure that Cube on a Spider Bomb might not end up being better in some situations or whatever.
Talk about Druid doing Druid things a lot of the time, but I guess Hunter just does Hunter things sometimes too. This has been a very one-sided game, even though there was that Wild Growth Twig opening for Kribo.
But then he just drew absolute garbage from that point on for about 5 turns.
I would say that maybe the cycle turn, or the turn that he decided to use Wrath for attack, is something I might not necessarily agree with. If he had used the Naturalize that turn, it would have removed one of the 5/5s anyway. I can't remember what the card he would have drawn was, but...
It did feel like it was a little bit too timid. And I mean, you can see how good Druid is from how it's even still alive. I know it's dead next turn, but how's he even got this far?
Branching Paths.
Yeah.
Well, he had a 18 mana turn, not that he used all of the mana, but that is a pretty good way to at least delay a lethal. So Faeli is going up 2-1, and Kribo looks absolutely devastated.
Yes, he does. But we've seen him look like this more than once throughout this tournament already. Make this deck really brutal. And again, thanks to Sottle for that. But it soon got that. This was Ike's doing. The odd Paladin just soon realised to be far better. Learn
to look at this curve from Kribo. That is really, really sick. And I think Faeli will need a Hellfire to neutralize this, especially since Bear Shark cannot be answered by anything else unless Kribo walks into Defile.
And this is the side of this deck we don't talk about often enough because we all hate it. When it does draw not the secret half, but the minion half, this curve is also absolutely brutal.
Yes. And in some ways, this is even better than the Secret into fully buffed Spellstone because of its resiliency to Hellfire. Not that it is more survivable, but it gets down earlier. It gets the job done before Hellfire can immediately remove everything before the minions even get to attack.
This could be a very short game of Hearthstone with the freezing trap as backup, just to make sure that it goes one extra turn with all the minions intact. Sort of a Houndmaster away from the absolute nuts here.
Yeah, Faeli has this hand which you would like to see against things like Druid, the Giant, and Twilight Drake. While you don't need to do much while the Druid is ramping, but against Hunter, he needs answers soon. He probably won't have the liberty to tap to the point where the Giant is available, or even if he does, it will just be checked by the freezing trap. Kribo's looking for plus attack on this Dire Mole, no doubt.
Yeah, I think he's working out when he wants to use this coin, because he's actually running out of things to do. So coin tracking and look for something is an option, but that can be delayed at least one more turn. That exact play is still there next turn after he plays the Bear Shark.
Yes.
And so there's no reason to do it until you have the extra information of your next card.
And he does kind of build his own Bear Shark in terms of stats this turn. That is already 7 damage represented on the board, and Faeli just looks really upset by this, kind of rolling his eyes, shaking his head. I think it was Faeli at also HCT Taichung that just died to double Bear Sharks.
Oh, right.
Yes, and that he was playing Malagos Druid at the time, but with a hand with no Hellfire, I mean, even Locke faces a very similar problem in not being able to answer these types of minions. Spellstone will help, but it won't help the actual Bear Shark.
Yeah, it's just going to be way too slow. And again, the tracking can be put on hold for another turn. He will want this Houndmaster, I feel.
So that is a reason for coining out the tracking this turn, or at least starting with it and then maybe coining out the Bear Shark. The sad part about losing the coin, I guess, is that you can't fit in a hero power with Eagle Hornbow next turn, which is not the worst thing at all. Kill Command. Yeah, we talked about that card for a long time, and pretty glad we did, because we could very well see it closing out this particular game.
Yeah, it looks really good when the rest of your hand has done what it has done so far. And it is no wonder people love this deck when the game plays out this way.
Yeah. Got a little ahead of myself with the caster vision, of course. Kribo wouldn't really want to coin out a Bear Shark into what would be a very scary Hellfire.
Yeah.
So he just does go for the snipe there. It is the superior secret when your opponent has no minions on board, but I do think it's not really the ideal play. I wonder if there was any argument for just fitting in the hero power instead. Maybe not if you expect Vulgar Homunculus.
Interesting that he didn't care about, well, he did care because he paused about Hooked Reaver there. It's the ideal spot when they're on 16 and they've only got 4 mana to actually potentially miss some damage. And he's like, you know what? Just going to carry on anyway.
It's just so insane that Hunter, when it gets this curve, even though Hellfire would be an ideal clear here, it's putting Faeli to this point where it's all he's doing on that turn and he's damaging himself as well. And he doesn't even have the Hellfire. If he wants to survive, it has to be a Spellstone this turn, I think. Well, you can Spell Break the Dire Mole, and there's not enough mana, I think, for Kribo to get the job done. But the Spellbreaker dies straight up to the Razor Maw, so he is just going to go for the Spellstone.
And he's had this amazing start without even using the coin yet. That seems ridiculous. Like, these starts are normally facilitated by some sort of crazy coin action.
Yeah. Kribo with the option to try to roll for Huffer. Even Misha is a decent outcome. I mean, Leok is a decent outcome here. Anything that pushes face damage immediately. Or you can set up the Bear Shark. But if he was scared of Hellfire last turn, not sure if he's too keen on playing it this turn.
I think he's trying to work out would Hellfire have been played last turn if he's got a Spellstone in hand. You'd buff your Spellstone, and if I haven't got lethal, then that would be the better play.
So Kribo can set.
Do you coin hero power?
I like it. I mean, look at the hand. The next turn is going to be one of these 3 drops. Most likely Kill Command and Hero Power anyways. So let's just maximize this damage, put Faeli to 10. And he needs to have a Hooked Reaver to survive. But even then, it's going to be damaged by the snipe, so I don't think it'll be enough.
It's working out the exact numberings, because that's a word.
I really like the coin hero power. Okay, it does allow next turn for Kribo to both play Eagle Horn Bow and Kill Command if he doesn't go for it this turn, so maybe that's some consideration. It is technically more damage, I suppose.
Yeah, there's other ways to work it there, so And we're looking at it from his point of view all the time here, because Faeli's hand is so jammed up because it's only turn 5 for Faeli.
I'm trying to figure out how it works around the Hooked Reaver, in which case it will be put to 3 health. So Eagle Horn Bow cleans it up nicely, but then Kill Command still doesn't get the job done. It would be 1 off. In this case, Kribo would be 2 off if he goes for the double 3s. And instead, I suspect he'll go for the Houndmaster because it just sets up this incredibly powerful, near impossible to remove board.
Yeah. Do you coin hero power?
I want to! Lorinda, come on!
Press the green button, it hurts
nice.
people.
Yeah.
They have fewer life points.
Alright. Houndmaster onto the Razor Maw. Push for 8 damage. Coin out the hero power, and next turn you can still play the double 3s. It has to be good now, right?
Yeah, I mean, the game's coming to conclusion very soon. Like you say, the double 3s may have been an issue last term, but it certainly isn't now.
Job's done.
And the Pew Pew is pressed. Faeli's down to 6.
And just like it didn't seem like there wasn't much Kribo could have done differently last game. Faeli himself didn't have too many options without an earlier Hellfire this game.
He's going to go to that game number 5. Just looking through what there is left. Obviously, this Warlock will be the pick for Faeli.
From Faeli's perspective, he can clear the board with Hellfire Defile and technically stay alive at 1 post-hero power, but Kribo has much more burst than necessary to close the job out. I think Faeli's just thinking about, how to calm down for the game 5.
Yeah. Faeli can be a very deliberate player when it does come to these crunch situations. I was saying earlier, I think he plays at varying speeds, just basic situation, which a lot of players don't. They just play the same speed all the time. But he does slow down when it matters.
Kribo chose the Eagle Horn Bow when he spent all that time talking about Kill Command.
Thanks, Kribo. Going to take it to a game 5. This is the last game to get them into the final here in Singapore.
And it will be a matchup that we have been seeing for quite a few months now, although maybe in different iterations, which is the Malagos Druid against that even lock.
Yeah, and you're a big fan of the Malagos Druid here. You feel that you've got the natural win, but you've also got the beat down because they've got low health total and lots.
And, that's not an inclusion for Kribo, though. Going with the more standard list of the 1 Florist and the Wrath. Yeah, don't see anything too worthy of note here.
See something worthy of note there, though. It's a Mountain Giant.
Yes, and there's a Nourish as well. And a Wild Growth, doubly noteworthy for Kribo. But I will say that yesterday I was casting with Daruk, and we were both just going nuts over this draw from Tom, who just kept top-decking ramp into this perfect minion curve, but still died just because he couldn't answer the Giants that were coming down from his opponent.
So we're going to see Faeli get the second Giant there.
Wow! Lorinda, this hand!
And it's going to be up against about 100 mana by the time he's played them.
I'm overreacting again, but yeah, you're right. This won't necessarily matter too much if the Giants can come down uncontested. But it's a big help for Kribo that he is on coin here, so that is essentially delaying the Giants by 1 turn, just by going second.
Well done, Coin.
Yes.
Did your job. And Faeli not scared here to fill up his hand. What if you throw out any more damage in the form of a 2-drop here? Just to get some extra damage to back up the Giants to make sure that it gets over the finishing line. Having
the taunt onto your big minions is usually not too relevant in this matchup, and I also think it's good to create more hand space because Faeli will want to keep tapping, and in case there is a naturalize, it's better to have less stuff in the hand, of course. So Kribo just gonna start with the Twig, which will actually go onto the Sun Fury here.
Yeah, he doesn't know there's 2 Giants coming his way, or he may not have done that.
Yeah.
But Faeli not having to make that eternal question of do I play Twilight Drake first, because he just has another Giant to go with his first one.
Also makes sense that he doesn't really want to help Faeli get to the Hooked Reaver activation necessarily. It's not really relevant when your Malagos combo can usually overshoot that health total anyway. Kribo with the Nourish option. This hand looks like it needs to go for a draw Nourish.
Again, but only because of what we can see. It's a lot closer otherwise, but he does take the draw. Means he doesn't get to kill off the
One more draw could be...
Protector.
Sorry, no. Yeah, my mistake there. Next turn, it would have to be a naturalized to actually deal with this. He doesn't even have Spellstones. I suppose Swipe and Wrath could do the job.
Sure. I mean, yeah, you're right. I'm foofing because I wouldn't like to be in that position.
Just dropping the Arcane Tyrant seems like Kribo needs to do that just so it
just
can
to help his swipe.
Yeah, potentially trade into the Giant.
And looking ahead here for Faeli, if the game happens to go longer because Kribo slows it down, he has other good stuff going well. Lich King, Twilight Drake is still there waiting for his backup plan, and the Bone Mare.
So Kribo actually doesn't drop the Tyrant, which makes me think he wants to go for a Plague next turn. It's a bit interesting because, of course, Faeli does have Mossy Horror in the list, but of course, having the Tyrant alongside the 2 Plagues is higher value, but man, it gets punished by that Mossy so hard.
Guess Faeli's wondering whether to tap or not. I assume the Giant's coming down.
So many possibilities.
Decides he doesn't need to tap with his hand. I think it's perfectly respectable. He has Twilight Drake for next turn alongside the 2-drop of his choice. He has the Ooze to eventually answer the Twig. And next turn, a similar outcome because he has another 4 and 2-drop, and then he can just curve into Lich King and Bone Mare. So he just doesn't want to have Naturalize be too much of a detriment if it is there for Kribo.
Obviously, it's not going to happen because Spreading Plague is in hand, but he is threatening lethal already.
Yeah.
Just the thought of that is ridiculous.
It is, yeah. Even Locke. I mean, I keep saying that I like this for the Malagos Druid, but man, they're just not getting the naturalizes, and that card is just extremely important to be able to answer boards like this.
Double Spreading Plague, though, is going to slow this down a great deal.
Yeah.
The Nourish for cards has given Kribo quite a bit of play in the next few turns, so although it looks absolutely horrendous, they can definitely turn the corner here.
Yeah, Kribo, they're just thinking if there's any way for him to maybe play around Mossy Horror. He decides that the only play around which involves using Swipe, Wrath, and Moonfire, and doesn't even clear both Giants, was just even more horrendous. It's never winning him the game, so he just has to hope the Mossy isn't there. And what is the draw for Faeli?
Views. Won't be playing that card.
Nope. The way the Hellfire and Spellbreaker works out, there's no way for him to get a Giant attack to the face, I think. Not enough mana to ensure that. So I do think Faeli will just want to be dropping this Twilight Drake onto the board. And maybe the Ooze alongside. Well, no, you're giving Kribo mana. It's a
You've
little
got the
too
Sun
early.
Fury. You can protect your 8/8s by just buffing up your other Sun Fury and your Twilight Drake. Keep those Giants intact so the 4/4 can't trade in with the swipe plan that we've looked at.
Yeah, I think that looks pretty solid.
Shields up.
And actually going to protect his Sun Fury as well. Play we see quite often. Just putting one big taunt in the way.
Yeah, it also works out that not only does the 4/4 not have the capability to weaken the Giant, these 2 minions also don't, or at least the Scarab doesn't have the ability to kill itself off and make more space for a second Spreading Plague.
Well, you can't mind Control Tech and Spreading Plague either, which is something he would dearly love to do right about now.
He
You can mind Control Tech and mind Control Tech though with the flute.
Yes, it looks like he needs to go for that. It seems superior than going for Wrath to remove one of the weaker targets for a mind control attack and then try to land one Giant. I do feel like Kribo needs to get really lucky to have a chance in this game. Safer play is another Plague, I suppose, and in that case, if you want to hit the Twilight Drake, you can have your Twig activation next turn, but there's 2 Ooze in the deck for Faeli. I don't think Kribo can reliably just go for that plan. It's a good one.
Oh, he gets a good start, and he's got another one still to come.
If it hits a Giant, this could be the swing that Kribo needs to be a finalist at HCT Singapore.
Time waits for no one.
Oh.
Not it, but the crowd.
Cheering and oohing in time to the cast as well there, seeing it as we see it.
I do think it means that Kribo is alive for the next turn just because it's such a high health taunt, and also there is another taunt in the way, so just the one Spellbreaker won't get the job done.
Yeah, it will turn quite rapidly here.
No Black Knight in the list for Faeli once again.
Spellstone would have been so good if it was already up to 5.
Yes, it would just have been... Well, it's still 1 mana off being able to do everything that Faeli wants to do. But I think this Spellbreaker is a little too good to pass. Well, maybe just Hellfire in that
The
case?
Hellfire looks really tasty as well. It's
With the Defile...
must be there.
So
You could just a very trivial one, but you hurt your own minions
Yeah.
so much.
there must be a way to order this that one giant survives and everything else dies. I think
Yeah,
go
you just hit the
Defile.
Twilight Drake, right? And then you defile, but then
Well,
your
you defile,
8/7 turns down to an
defile
8/2.
first so that you don't... oh, wait. But then you don't kill the 1/5 that way, right? So... Oh! We're blind, Lorenda. This is perfect.
Yeah, that's what I thought, yeah. I just didn't think the Spellbreaker was enough. This is actually lethal, so... Playing the Spellbreaker to make the 3 gets it done.
Very well played to Faeli, and that is quite a heartbreaker for Kribo after going through